It's the Sheriff Sit Down, presented by our great friends at Our Community Credit Union. We got a gaggle of them in today. Good morning. Morning, Spencer.
Good morning.
Morning.
Jail Chief Hanson, Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury, Chief Deputy Ryan Spurling. Guys, good to see you all in here this morning.
Morning.
Made
Good
it
morning.
in okay?
Good morning. Oh, yeah, I'd shovel a little snow, but that's all right.
I was about ready to call you, Casey.
I still have the equipment in the back of my truck. I was going to help a friend get out of the snow last year. I still have that in there.
Get me out of here. We've got a lot to talk about with you guys here in the Sheriff Sit Down. Let's talk first, going back last week to the escape of Hartwell Jr. He was at the courthouse there, and we saw the video of him rushing through the doors, and it was a couple days, I believe, before law enforcement was able to apprehend him. Chief Deputy Spurling, I'll start with you and just kind of go with us through the events from the courtroom through the capture.
I'll actually give the courtroom portion and the initial escape to Chief Hanson because he's a little bit more familiar with exactly what was his people involved.
So Hartwell came into jail about 3 days prior to that. I think he came out on Friday, or it was 3 days prior, and he was housed in a holding cell and had been obviously under the influence of something. Our policies prohibit us from retaining the restraints on individuals when they go into the courtroom, but we do restrain them when we leave the jail en route to the courtroom.
Okay.
So just outside the courtroom, we have to take the handcuffs off them, or whatever restraints we have on them, we have to take off, and that's based upon a recent court decision out of the Washington State Court of Appeals from November of 2018 that says that the judge has the specific authorization to determine what restraints, if any, are in any courtroom.
Oh.
Washington State. We just can't have a blanket policy anymore. So this particular situation, we didn't have a restraining hearing because we know the guy, and I mean, he's been coming in out of our jail for years, and we didn't deem him as a threat.
Okay.
So my two transport officers take him up to the courtroom. We take the handcuffs off. He goes into the courtroom in front of the judge, and my staff positions themselves where they usually position, one by the public entrance door and one kind of in the back of the courtroom by the judge. Well, one of my deputies went to get some paperwork from the court clerk, and he turned around. As soon as he turned around, the inmate bolted from the jury box to the public entrance of the courtroom, ran down the stairs right past the security people in the front door there where the screening thing is, and down the front steps, and then across 2 yards and across one of the main streets down here in Alder Street down here in Shelton. And
holy moly.
Unfortunately, one of my deputies fell and ended up injuring himself, and he's out of work now. So
oh, no.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate.
So then kind of on the lam, is that what they call it? You're out kind of looking for this person now for the next couple of days at large. And how does that process play out, and the number of phone calls that come in either to Shelton Police or Mason County Sheriffs or whoever? I know that a lot of tips that may or may not have been viable came in to you guys figuring out where this person may be. Did you have any initial thoughts or leads that you could track down, or how does that all work?
Well, the first thing we try to do is, if we lose sight of them, we're going to set up a perimeter and try to secure an area and call in the canine handler to see if the dog will track, because obviously the dog is much better at that type of thing than we are.
Let me stop you right there with the canine. What do you give to the canine to notice the scent of that person?
They'll usually take them back as far as they can on the trail, or if there's an article of clothing.
Okay.
We had the slippers that he had just slipped off because he was barefooted, with that type of thing. And then you have the dog take the scent, and then the dog will start tracking on that. And we had the perimeter set up, and this is truly a county-wide law enforcement effort. This was not just the sheriff's office. We had the PD there, and then through the course of time, we had both tribal agencies and other agencies asking questions, getting leads, sending them to us, and then our guys worked extremely hard. But go back to the initial one. We set up the perimeter and we started a dog track. The dog track went through some areas. We actually went through a building. Don't know if he had gone through that building, and then it tailed off at the building and started up towards the trails that go up towards the hospital. And then we lost the scent at that point. So that immediate track was stopped because it went cold.
Okay.
And at that point, we had to regroup, start looking and gathering intelligence, gathering information. And if people have information in these type of situations, the big thing they need to know is call 911. Don't try to report it on a social media website, because we don't monitor those. We don't have enough personnel to go through and look for tips. So we always encourage them to call 911. But we have had a lot of, like you said, somebody give a tip that he was in Safeway, somebody give a tip that he was over here, and the city and all of the tribal agencies worked together with us. And it took us a few days. And in the process, we also ended up making some major arrests out of Kitsap County because we got those 4. I think the guy's name was Cheryl, the one that was wanted out of Kitsap County. On Friday night, we arrested him and 3 others after a pursuit. And then on early Saturday morning at about 5 o'clock in the morning, we were able to make the arrest on Donnie Hartwell.
Does running away, I always thought that these guys aren't thinking clearly, like they want their freedom, but doesn't running away put them in far worse shape than if they just had their day in court? Like, what was the worst this guy was facing anyway, and now what is he facing by leading you guys on a day-long, search for, days-long search for this guy?
I think oftentimes, you're not thinking real clearly when you got there in the first place, and I'm not sure that you're always, that's always an improvement over when you first got there. And so, yes, it results in a worse situation for them.
It's new felony charges for escape 1 in this particular situation.
And then if an officer's hurt, does that make it even worse?
No, because he didn't injure him, so he wasn't charged directly injure him, like assault him or anything, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Huh.
But it was truly a county-wide effort by all law enforcement. They all assisted us a whole bunch. So we were really appreciative of that, and the citizens were paying attention, and they wanted to see him brought to justice as well.
So when you're out looking, you mentioned the dog, the canine went through a building. How accessible normally are the citizens? If you come to the door like with the canine and say, listen, we have reason to believe perhaps an individual either is in this building or in your house, how does that process work out while it's an active situation pursuant at that moment where you may not be able to in other situations go and I don't know, get paperwork or warrants or whatever it takes to go through those on a regular basis?
Yeah, an active search is a little different. Fresh pursuit, the laws are a little different. But the big thing for the citizens is make sure that you're paying attention if a dog is coming, and just do what the handler tells you, because the big thing we don't want citizens getting bit because they start acting as if they're running or in danger or something along those lines. And the handlers are really good. They're very well trained, and the dogs are well trained. I stood out there and the dog came around me. You just stand still and do what the handler tells you, and hopefully everything goes smoothly there. And the dog he's working, and they're paying attention to scent, and they're doing good things.
Sure.
The dogs are really focused. I mean, they're tracking that scent. They're very focused. The other thing that really helps is if you have your own animals, own dogs especially, if you keep them away, that they're not trying to follow one of our dogs or interrupt the dog while it's working, because they're very focused. I mean, they very seldom get their attention diverted for anything else other than that track.
How long have you guys had K9 now at the sheriff's office? How many years?
Oh my!
Well, it goes back quite a ways. We had one funded years ago.
Yeah, we really started. I'm not sure if all my numbers are exactly right on this, but one of the reasons I worked for another agency before, and our K9 units would ask to work the west side of the county because they knew that all the calls that were coming in were going to be from Mason County. Was going to have the hot dog calls most of the time, and we actually when I came over here, we had a lot of stolen cars and a lot of people taking off on us without the dogs, and we tried to go in and get the funding for that, and it just did not happen through the commission in those days. And so we went out and started raising the funds for those dogs ourselves. And our first one, the first dog that we had was Kona. She was a little pit bull, and we used her for narcotics detection. And we wanted to start off with that first, and then we started raising enough money through citizens' donations to bring in our next our next dogs, our track dogs. And boy, what a success it's been. I mean, we tried to convince people how important that would be, and it just didn't seem to want to go over. And when we went out and finally did it ourselves, the success of the program has been unbelievable, and the support too. Again, I remind you that funding for those dogs comes in solely from the citizens' donations to get the dogs. And when we do canine programs, we have people write checks and hand us money to support the program, and it's been a fantastic program for 7-8 years, more than that.
Yeah, it's been more like 10 years.
About 10 years. And it's been a super successful program. Our handlers have done a great job, and
now the city has done the same
city's
thing.
got a dog now. The apprehensions are fantastic. It used to be, quite honestly, when I first came here, somebody stole a car and they take off on you, they just bail out and go in the woods because you're not going to send. And in those days, we had maybe 1, maybe 2 deputies working the road, and you're not going to send one person out in the middle of the woods with a carload of people. Now the odds change a little bit when you have that dog and you know where they're going and who's out there. And it really started to cut down on our problems of people just taking off on us.
So again, just another good look at the hard work, not only by the sheriff's office, but then in collaboration with the tribes and the city, and just another good showing there from law enforcement professionals. That's good work, and that's scary, because I would assume while this is happening, while he's in front of the judge and getting away, there's other folks in the courtroom getting ready for either their own adjudication or just citizens in there as well.
Attorneys, prosecutors, defense attorneys got knocked over when my staff tried to chase the guy.
This isn't the only time this has happened, in the only courtroom it's happened in. We both know a family of judges where an individual was in handcuffs and took off out of the courtroom, and the judge in that case actually apprehended that individual running down the stairs just outside the main building.
Run a lot slower in handcuffs.
You run a lot slower in handcuffs, but that made a big difference, and it's happened in a lot of places.
Yeah,
I can tell you that the next time this guy goes to court, we're going to petition the court to have handcuffs on him.
I was going to ask that. Yeah, they're going to change the policy a little bit.
Change it on that one. So that's and that's kind of another thing you always hear. It's the judge's courtroom. I mean, it's their prerogative on a lot of those things.
The court ruled, Ninth Circuit ruled that, and as well as the Washington State Court of Appeals, specifically in this most recent case of Lundstrom. That's what they said, is the judge has complete authority over what restraints are used in the courtroom.
Wow.
And if we use restraints.
Yeah.
And that comes back to the Washington State Constitution, is what I learned through this process. I didn't realize that it had gone all the way back to the 1800s.
Huh.
Yeah, there's a case from like 1892 about it.
Amazing. Sheriff Sit Down this week and every week, brought to you by our friends at Our Community Credit Union. Thank you, guys. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
If there's any sorts of inclement weather, you guys need to share any messages, you know how to get in touch with us, and we'll get the information out.